Hello and welcome. In today's video, my colleague and I from the Visa Pathfinders will be comparing the United Kingdom and Canada. Before we get into that, my name is Gbemiga Peter Olubayo. I have lived in the UK for 4 years as at the time of recording this video, and my colleague Saheed once lived in the UK for over a year and now is a permanent resident of Canada. Just a background to our discussion today, these two beautiful countries are diverse and well developed. So we will not be attributing scores to the factors we are going to discuss today, but we are going to give you information that will help you to make that decision based on your personal and family situation. As we unpack many factors that immigrants like yourself have told us are quite important for them to consider when making this decision about where to move to. If you are new on this channel, please subscribe to this channel, like and share this video, and also to our many subscribers. Thank you so much. We can't thank you enough. Let's get started.
To start with, we'll be talking about proximity, and the UK basically it's closer to Africa. Nigeria, for instance, is about a 6-hour trip from the UK, from London. Um, when you talk about places you can actually visit when you're in the UK, they mostly the European countries that are closer to the UK, and those include Germany, Italy, Sweden, France, and the rest of them. However, Canada is further from Nigeria. The average flight time is about 18 hours, sometimes even running up to 24 hours. So, and most of the flights do include one or two stopovers or connecting flights. So, places you can really travel to for vacation would include the United States or Mexico or the Caribbean island, among others. Talking about immigration and citizenship, the pathway to citizenship in the UK it's often longer, especially for people who do go to the UK on Tier 4 student visa. So for those who do migrate to the UK on the Tier 2 general work visa, it takes an average of 5 years for you to be able to be eligible to apply for what is called the indefinite leave to remain, the ILR, to settle in the UK. Apart from that, you you can apply for citizenship and the UK citizenship if you've lived in the UK for 5 years, and at least you would have to have had the ILR for at least 12 months before you're eligible to apply. When it comes to Canada, the pathway to citizenship it's a little longer for students as well. Pretty much similar to what happens in the UK. For those who do come to Canada on study permit, they would be eligible to apply for a post-graduation work permit, which is called a PGWP. The PGWP really ranges from a minimum of 8 months to 3 years. So take for instance, someone has studied a program for 1 year, you would be eligible for a 1 year PGWP. However, if you've gone for a program or you've had a program that runs for 2 years thereabout, then you could be eligible for a PGWP of two running up to 3 years. So, meanwhile, for those that do migrate to Canada based on the federal express entry or the provincial nomination across the various provinces we got in Canada, as well as the territories. At least you must have lived in Canada as a permanent resident 3 out of the last 5 years for you to be eligible to apply at all for a Canadian
The
citizenship.
major difference between this country, when you look at immigration, especially the United Kingdom, there is no definite route to residency for students. So if you come in as a student on Tier 4, you can only achieve residency by transferring to a Tier 2 visa, which you then have to follow that pathway again. or if you stay in the UK for a very long time of 10 years, which can be financially draining and also draining emotionally. But the Canada offers you a more definite pathway, even after as a student. All those Canadian experiences and studies you gather qualify you when you enter into the Federal Express entry, or can even qualify you more prominently for the provincial nomination program.
Talking about job opportunities, it is actually looking pretty similar in both countries. What you need to do is to prove your transferable skills that you can do a job, and probably you're securing the job in the process. So, but there are actually some fields that would require some form of certification. I'll take, for instance, you're a nurse, a doctor, or lawyer. It would require some form of certification in both countries. And in Canada, it looks to be like it's a little bit more challenging, kind of, for some professions to be able to integrate into the system based on the recertification process.
So, as Saeed has mentioned regarding job opportunities, it tends to be that getting a job in the UK could be quite easier than Canada, especially professional jobs. This is because a lot of employers consider Canadian experience to be very important. Okay, but in the UK, your skills and experience, even your studies from Asia, from Africa, can be considered as transferable skills for you in the United Kingdom. There are other factors migrants like you and I consider when deciding where to move to. Take, for instance, benefit. And in this video, we'll talk about childcare benefit, for instance. So in the UK, if you come in as a student or as a skilled worker, your visa states that you have no recourse to public fund, of which childcare benefit is among. So meaning that you have to stay like 5 years until when you get your indefinite leave to remain before you start getting this benefit for your children under the age of 16. Now, as at the time of making this video, eldest child will get £24 per week, and any additional child will get about 15.9 Great British pound. This accounts to about £1,250 for the eldest child, and just below £850 for the for any additional child. Now, however, in Canada, what if you enter Canada as a permanent resident, you can start claiming that free money, tax-free money from your first year. You get what I mean? More so, even students who enter, even those who goes to Canada as a student can start claiming that money after living for 18 months in Canada. And also, the amount you get per child in Canada is greater than that of the UK, as you can see on your screen. So, what do you think?
There are other factors you also need to look at. One of those is the childbirth. So, childbirth in the UK, for instance, an individual may be eligible to apply to register as a British citizen if he or she was born in the UK. And it would, however, depend on the individual. I mean, it would depend on when the individual was born and the parent's circumstance. So it's not just the individual being born in the UK alone, but also based on the circumstance of the parents. However, in Canada, if a child is born in Canada, the child receives Canadian citizenship status.
I think this alone could be a big blow to the UK. So, what Said is saying essentially is that you don't become a citizen of the United Kingdom by birth because you are born here. Okay, so a child takes the status of the parent. So, if a parent is on visa and gave birth to a newborn, so the newborn will need visa to stay in the UK as well. But if the parent has ILR, indefinite leave to remain, the child will also have the status and can get citizenship. And also, if the parents are citizens already, the child becomes a UK citizen. That's how it works. But in Canada, if you give birth to a child, the child becomes a citizen. Interesting, isn't it?
Generally, talking about study work and post-study work permit, it is much faster in the UK because it takes an average of 1 month to process your application, and you can apply from 6 months before the start of your program, and how long you can stay in the UK is actually dependent on the program you're running. So, take for instance, you're running a bachelor's degree program, you would be eligible to stay in the UK for, say, up to 5 years. However, if you're running a master's degree program, you're able to stay in the UK for up to 2 years. So you can arrive in the UK before the start of your program, say 1 month before the start of a program, especially if it's more than a 6 month program that you're running. And also, when it comes to the cost, the study visa in the UK costs um, in excess of £350. I think the last time I checked, it was around £363. So when you're applying from outside the UK, and you may also be able to bring your partner and children as dependents to the UK when you're applying for study visa. So they might come with you or they come much later. When you offer a place on the program, so your educational provider will send you what is called the confirmation of acceptance for study, which is nicknamed CAS. So this CAS is what you would use. There is a reference number that you would be using in applying for your visa. Also in the UK, when you come through to the UK as a student on the Tier 4 visa, you're able to work for up to 20 hours a week when you are in session. However, when it comes to Canada, it's a little longer because the last time I checked, it's an average of 2 months. It varies, so you can't really say this is exactly the timeline, but at the last check, it was around 2 months average. And the processing time does not necessarily include, the biometrics capturing as well as the transfer of your application from the application center to the office. So, prospective students in Canada would have to find full-time courses in what is called the designated learning institutions. They refer to as the DLI. I will put the link that shows the complete list of DLIs. Those are the institutions that can actually offer a post-graduation work permit to someone who wants to come to Canada to study. And in that, you would have what is called the DLI numbers also listed for each and every institution that is on that list. So the PGWP, like I said earlier, it is what allows you to be able to stay back in Canada depending on the length of your study program. So it is a minimum of 8 months up to a maximum of 3 years, depending on what program you've studied. Also, to apply for a study permit, you would need an acceptance letter from a DLI, that's from a designated learning institution. So, and that is a DLI usually is a school that is approved by a provincial or territorial government to host international students. So, also in Canada, you're able to work for 20 hours a week when you're in session. However, recently students may be eligible to work more hours per week under off campus, actually, under a temporary public policy that was made by the government. For the Canada study permit, you would be applying. The costs for application would be 150 Canadian dollars per person. So that something I forgot to mention for the UK is that there is the necessary payment of the health surcharge, which also counts as which you need to pay for as part of your application for study as a student coming to the UK.
So, in essence, what we discover about coming to study in the UK as against Canada is that it tends to be faster in the UK in as much as you have your money, within 6 months you can land in the UK, that's how fast it could be. But Canada, it takes a lot of processes and you have to understand that. But deciding where to migrate to is a big decision and definitely takes beyond how quick you can get into that country. Before we move on to compare the cost of living in these two beautiful countries, it's not enough that you enjoy this video. You'll be helping us by clicking on the like button. That helps the YouTube algorithm to suggest this video to people who need this information the more. And also click on the subscribe button, of course. Like and share this video and click the notification icon so you can get notification for any of our wonderful videos as we drop them. Thank you so much. We can't thank you enough. All right. So, having said that, Let's look at the cost of living in these two countries.
So when it comes to cost of living, it's really pretty relative because cost of living is really dependent on where you live. So, for instance, in the UK, if you're living in a city like London, or you're living in Birmingham, or you're living in Manchester, so these are big cities that you can't compare the cost to when you're living in other smaller cities or towns. So, the cost of living would really be dependent on where you live, and the same thing is, applicable in Canada. The same thing is applicable in Canada because for someone living in Ottawa, in Toronto, in Vancouver, you can't compare the cost of living to people living in places like, say, in Regina, for instance, or in other smaller communities compared to those other big cities. So it is relative. So all in all, you want to look at all of these factors in general. So you can't just, make a decision based on one or, two factors. You want to look at everything holistically and make a decision, to the best of your own comprehension of everything that has been said and other research that you do or your findings on your own.
Regarding housing, apart from the fact that, the houses in Canada are bigger, wonderful. I can move to Canada because of bigger houses, to be fair. you know, the houses in Canada seems to be bigger. You can even get basements for the same cost at which you get very small house in the UK. And I think in particular for migrants like from Africa, from Asia, we need to mention that Asian foodstuff, African foodstuff cost lesser in the UK. This could be because of the fact that UK is quite closer to these countries compared to Canada.
Another thing we're looking at is that of healthcare system. So in the UK, basically, the National Health Service, which is called the NHS, covers hospital treatment in various the A&E, the minor injury treatments in clinics and so forth. So when you go see your GP and all of that, so these are things that under the NHS you can do. So and for students who have come into the UK and paid the health surcharge alongside their application for Tier 4 visa, they would be eligible to also access some NHS services. However, you might need to pay for certain type of services such as prescription drugs, dental treatments, among others. This is pretty similar in Canada as well, but the difference is just that in Canada, it's referred to as the Universal Health Care System, which is funded through taxes. And in Canada as well, it seems to be like there is something about the dental because in Canada as well, most of the cost of dental treatments is not covered under the universal healthcare system. And so you've got to pay for that out of pocket or some other ways, maybe at work or something like that. Then you're able to probably access such services. Apart from that, I think the other thing we would be looking at is weather. The weather in the UK is much milder compared to Canada, with the winter months really hovering around, say, 0 degrees, and with very minimal snowfall accompanying that during the winter. However, in the summer, it's an average of say 15 degrees Celsius, and compared to Canada, in the winter in Canada, it's usually freezing cold across most of the provinces, and you would be looking at snowfall across, especially the months of November, December, January, which are kind of, the coldest months in the country. And usually the temperatures will be well below 0 degrees. So there are places on the average, say negative 20 degrees. And however, in the summer, it could be also excessively hot in some provinces, like in the prairies, where you could have an average degree weather of 25 or even warmer than
As
that.
we move close to the end of this video, we know that a lot of us want to know how much our net income will be after tax and all that. As you can see on your screen, we think that the best way to compare the tax And net pay in this country is by looking at the same figure, the same income. So if you earn about 50,000 Great British pound in the UK, the equivalent of that in Canadian dollar in the capital of Canada. So showing on your screen, you have a take home of 76% in the UK, and about 70.8% if you live in Ontario, Canada. Now, what you also have to bear in mind is that the tax bracket varies from one province to another in Canada, whereas it's the same thing in the UK. So you might be better off in some um, provinces compared to what you are seeing on our screen. And secondly, in the UK, apart from all these other deductions you are seeing here, we also pay council tax, which could go to close to 2,000 for an average family per annum. So these are all those stuff you need to calculate, figure out together to work out which of these country will suit you better. I'm also looking at the tax brackets in the UK. Once you earn above 50,270, your tax liability increased to 40% of your earnings above that threshold. But in Canada, it seems to be the highest you can ever pay is 33%. So yeah, we'll leave you to work out the rest. Yes, thank you so much. If you work to this point, thank you so much. So is it UK or is it Canada? Which of these countries did you think win this argument? And also, we want to believe that you can make more informed choices. And also, don't forget that we are not claiming to be an island of knowledge. If your experience is different, if you disagree with any of these points, let us hear from you. Let us hear if you agree as well. Let us learn together. And until next time we meet, stay blessed, stay happy. We love you. Bye.